Imagine walking up to a tree looking for fruit. You find none. So you curse the tree. That would already seem strange. But according to the Gospel of Mark, Jesus did exactly that. And here's the part that makes the story even stranger. Mark tells us it was not even the season for figs. So why would Jesus expect fruit from a tree that was not supposed to have any? And why would he curse it? And for centuries, readers have wrestled with that question. Because at first glance, this story feels completely out of character. Jesus heals people, feeds crowds, raises the dead, shows mercy to sinners, yet one of his most dramatic miracles appears to be directed at a tree. So what is really happening here? To understand the story, we need to understand when it happens. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and the city is crowded with pilgrims. Passover is approaching, tension is building, and Jesus is about to enter the final week before his crucifixion. Everything in the story is moving toward a climax. That context matters because the fig tree story is not an isolated event. It is connected to something else that happens on the very same day. According to Mark's Gospel, Jesus sees a fig tree in the distance, and the tree is covered in leaves. From far away, it looks healthy, promising, fruitful. But when he gets closer, he finds nothing. No figs, only leaves. Then Jesus says, "May no one ever eat fruit from you again." And the disciples hear him say it. At this point, many readers stop and ask the obvious question: why? If it was not fig season, what exactly was the tree supposed to do? And this is where the story gets interesting. Because in the ancient world, a fig tree covered in leaves often suggested that some early edible buds should already be present. The leaves advertised fruitfulness. The appearance suggested abundance, but the reality was different. The tree looked productive, yet produced nothing. Keep that idea in mind, because immediately after this scene, Jesus enters Jerusalem and he walks straight into the temple. What happens next is one of the most famous moments in the Gospels. Jesus overturns tables, drives out merchants, and accuses the temple authorities of turning a house of prayer into something corrupted. Suddenly, the story is no longer about agriculture. It is about appearances, something that looks healthy, something that appears fruitful, and something that presents itself as devoted to God. But underneath, something is missing. And that is why many scholars believe the fig tree is acting as a living symbol. Not merely a tree, a warning. The Bible actually uses fig trees this way before. Throughout the Old Testament, Israel is sometimes compared to a vineyard, a tree, or a garden. Fruit often symbolizes faithfulness, justice, righteous, and the outward evidence of a healthy relationship with God, which means the question may not be, why did Jesus curse a tree? The real question may be, what was the tree representing? And when viewed that way, the story begins to look very different. The tree is full of leaves, full of signs, full of appearances, yet bears no fruit. The temple appears impressive. Religious activity is everywhere, and crowds are gathering. Sacrifices are being offered. But Jesus sees something deeper, and he finds the same problem. Plenty of leaves, very little fruit. But there's another detail that makes the story even more fascinating. Mark tells the story in an unusual way. The fig tree appears. Then the temple cleansing happens. Then the disciples return and discover the tree has withered. The story is split into two parts, and almost like a sandwich. Fig tree, temple, fig tree. Biblical scholars have noticed this for years, because Mark often uses this structure when he wants readers to connect two events. In other words, the tree helps explain the temple, and the temple helps explain the tree. Neither story fully makes sense without the other. The tree is not interrupted by accident. The interruption is part of the message, and once you notice that, the entire passage changes. The focus is no longer on whether Jesus was angry at a plant. The focus shifts to what the plant symbolizes: a warning against empty appearances, a warning against outward religion without inward transformation, a warning against looking alive while producing nothing, and suddenly the story becomes surprisingly relevant. Because most people are not worried about fig trees, but everyone understands appearances. A business can look successful while quietly collapsing. A friendship can look healthy while falling apart. A person can appear confident while struggling inside. A community can look strong while losing the values that once made it healthy. Leaves are easy. Fruit is harder. Appearance is easy. Transformation is harder. And that tension sits at the center of the story, which brings us back to the original question. Why did Jesus curse a fig tree? The honest answer is that Christians have offered different interpretations. But one of the most common is that the miracle was never primarily about the tree itself. It was a visual lesson, a living parable, a symbol of something that looked fruitful but was not. And if that interpretation is correct, then the miracle becomes one of the most powerful object lessons in the Gospels. Not because a tree withered, but because of what it represented. The challenge was never directed only at ancient Jerusalem. It extends to every generation that values appearance over substance, every institution that values image over integrity, every person who mistakes activity for fruitfulness. And perhaps that is why the story still feels uncomfortable, because it quietly asks a question that is much harder than, why did Jesus curse a fig tree? It asks, what in our own lives has leaves but no fruit? But what do you think? What's your answer to this question? The Bible is full of mysteries, and not all of them have simple answers. So what's a Bible question you've always wondered about? Leave it in the comments. It might become our next video.